Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's FPC Radio Live. It's Tuesday, November the 8th. It's election day, folks, and just a reminder out there, I don't really care, actually. Quite frankly, I'm excited for this to get over with, and just I'm tired of seeing these election ads. I mean, I'm a very let's just say my outlook on politics is very bleak and very very dim, John. So I'm not the person you want to talk to when it comes to wanting to get encouraging advice about the state of politics in this country. But it is election day, so if you're going to vote, go out and vote, and do so with with a little critical thinking there, folks. Let's not believe everything we hear on television. So one thing I kind of almost didn't believe when I saw it, John, was well, first of all, the Colts fired Frank Reich. But that's not surprising. I mean, they went 0 for 14 on third down against the Patriots. It's not necessarily his fault. He's had a new starting quarterback every season. But what was surprising and what I almost didn't believe, John, was that Jeff Saturday, ESPN personality, former Colts center, Super Bowl champion, was named the interim head coach. So at first I was like, wow, this is kind of wild, and no one really saw this coming. And I'm sure people are going to be outraged over it. But I started thinking about it, John, and you know what? How many of these coaching quote unquote prodigies ultimately work out as head coaches? You know what I mean? Like, how often do we hear, oh, Josh McDaniels? Well, guess what? Oh, Nathaniel Hackett. Well, guess what? Cliff Kingsbury. Guess what? And you know what? The list goes on and on and on. So I started to think, why the hell not? I mean, they haven't gotten it right in any regard. You might as well completely swing for the fences and go outside the box and see if this works. So, what are your thoughts on the Jeff Saturday hiring in Indianapolis?
Well, we weren't surprised, right, that Frank Reich was fired. He just looked like a beaten man on Sunday. The whole team looked like a beaten team on Sunday. I think once you mandate from the front office, whether it be ownership or the general manager, that your starting quarterback is now going to sit on the sideline because if he gets injured, it's going to cost us $18 million next year. I think that doesn't sit well with the players who are there just to win. You can't get players to tank. You can get organizations to tank, but it just felt like they had no soul out there, the Indianapolis Colts. So moving away from Frank Reich wasn't really a surprise. This is an outside-the-box hire, to say the least. The highest level that he's ever coached is high school. People love him in Indianapolis. He's a personality, without question, right? You see him on ESPN. So maybe they're figuring he can come in, galvanize the locker room, and be more of the CEO coach, not the guy who's in there drawing up game plans. That's what you get your coordinators for. The only problem is they also fired Marcus Brady, the offensive coordinator, a week ago. Yeah. So, maybe Jim Irsay is going to be calling plays from the owner's box. Who the hell knows? But it does appear that they're tanking. They've got only 3 wins right now, so maybe they want to tank to the point that they can get into drafting their next quarterback, because they can't get that position right. Once Andrew Luck retired, you went to Jacoby Brissett, who's just a placeholder. We can all admit that. Phillip Rivers actually had decent success. They got to the playoffs. Carson Wentz wasn't all that good, and Matt Ryan's been even worse. So they got to get that situation straightened out. But yeah, I mean, who knows what's going to happen? I think Mike Singletary, when he was hired as head coach of the 49ers, had already been coaching. And he kind of had that commanding presence, right? I think Mike Vrabel has that, right? That type of, larger-than-life figure. But Vrabel went and became a coach at the college level. Like, he got into the nitty-gritty. He was coaching linebackers at Ohio State. So when he was hired, he had already been a positional coach in college, a coordinator in the NFL. So he was ready to go. So maybe that's what the new thing is let's bring in these larger-than-life coaches, because it's either that or the guy in Miami, Mike McDaniel, who looks like he's out of a Wes Anderson film. Like, there doesn't seem to be any in between, right? Like,
no,
I was kind of kidding a couple of weeks ago. I couldn't wait to see the embrace between Mike McDaniel and Dan Campbell. Because Mike McDaniel is like 5'7", 150 pounds, and you get Dan Campbell is like 6'6", 280.
Yeah.
Like, that must have been the funniest embrace in the history of embraces. But look, they're tanking. Does he just come in for this year and then at the end of the year goes back to TV? Who knows? I mean, Jim Irsay is, not the most focused owner. We can agree on that. And this is a way maybe for him to get some sort of publicity out of it, because if he had just promoted one of his assistants to become the head coach, we wouldn't even be talking about it.
Well, and look, I mean, the norm in the NFL is to do that, but the reality of it is this team hasn't been a good team. So, if I'm thinking about it, why would you expect one of the assistants on this team to make anything
Right.
better? You know what I mean? So from that standpoint, the move starts to actually make a little bit more sense. And I like your Mike Vrabel example, and it's a fine line between having experience and not in this situation, because again, it wasn't like Mike Vrabel was going through the coaching ranks for years and years and years. I mean, it was really a quick rise for him, but we've seen over the last handful of years, I mean, he's been probably one of the better coaches, certainly one of the better new coaches in the league. I mean, consistent to say the very least, and certainly has turned that Tennessee team into a, whether you want to believe they're a serious contender or not, that's a different discussion, but they're certainly competing. And certainly I would take Mike Vrabel over a lot of the big name hot coaches, hot name coaches that come into the league every year, wherever they always get hyped up as the next big thing. Like, remember the honeymoon period with Dan Campbell? Oh, he has such a great news press conference. The media loves him. He's going to bite kneecaps. Well, yeah, I mean, with the case is in the pudding. I mean, he has a worse record with the Lions than he did with the Dolphins, and he only was an interim coach there. So, from that standpoint, I'm like, all right, why not? This might be the best move for him, because, I mean, as much as he's a TV personality now, the guy was a great player at a very important position on the offensive line. I know it doesn't get a lot of praise and a lot of accolades or all that stuff, but when you're talking about a guy who is the only other guy that touches the ball as much as the quarterback and has maybe as much responsibility in terms of setting out coverages and pass blocking and everything like that and communicating, it's a very important position that you have to be a pretty smart player and good. Obviously, you need talent, but you also need to be smart. We talk about quarterbacks having to be very heady. Very a lot of the position is from the neck up. Center and key offensive line positions like that absolutely can be like that. So I'm looking at Jeff Saturday. I said, well, maybe the guy knows something about football. And what are they going to do worse than what they've done now? Go 0 for 15 on third and fourth down?
Yeah, I mean, it can only go up, and they're playing the Raiders next week, which, I would think Josh McDaniels is going to have to win that game, because if you lose to a team that appears to be tanking, that's not good for Josh McDaniels and the Raiders. Yeah, the whole idea of the center being a coach is a good point, Ian, because the center is kind of like the catcher in baseball, and we see so many former catchers become really good managers because, they have to see the game from a different viewpoint than the rest of the players. They have to line up the defenses. They have to be, playing with their head more than anything. The same thing with the center. They get set up the blocking schemes for their four fellow offensive linemen. They have to have a good rapport with their quarterback, which he had with Peyton Manning and what Brady's had with the likes of, Dan Copen and David Andrews and all the players that have been really good centers for the Patriots. Even Ryan Jensen in Tampa Bay, you can tell that Brady loves the guy. So yeah, you have to have that combination of quarterback, and the center really does help the quarterback quite a bit. And Saturday does have a huge personality, so I'm sure his first speech to the team, whether it came yesterday or is coming today, is going to be interesting. But the players may see right through that if he comes in with his Super Bowl ring, right, and starts talking about himself going to the Pro Bowl a half a dozen times. They don't care about that stuff. But I think that, look, if all else fails, try something else, right? Like, what are you going to do? Promote the defensive coordinator to become the head coach, and where exactly does that go? And again, they appear to be in a tanking mode at this point, right? I would think.
Yeah.
When you sit your number one quarterback and you bypass. They would have a better chance to win if Nick Foles was playing than Ellinger, I would think. I mean, Nick Foles.
Well, I mean, I understand wanting to see what you have in the young kid. I mean, we know who Nick Foles is, and at this point, tanking from an organizational standpoint, you said it earlier. Organizations may like the idea of tanking. You're not going to get players and coaches to tank because that's their livelihood. So I just don't think they're a good team. I mean, let's face it, their quarterback situation is in the toilet. Jonathan Taylor is out. Their defense is mediocre at best. So you add all those things up, and they're not a great team. And look, part of that could be coaching. I mean, we mentioned it before. It's not necessarily Frank Reich's problem or issue that they've had so many different starting quarterbacks, but at a certain point, he can't keep getting a pass. And I think Jim Irsay was obviously, that was it. He was done giving him a pass. So I don't think they're going to be that good. I mean, they still beat the Chiefs earlier this season, so they're capable. But I get like staying with Sam Ellinger just because, well, you got to know. And they didn't put the official. They just added Saturday as the interim tag, so I don't think there's any expectation right off the bat that he's definitely going to keep the job. It's, well, let's see what you have. We have half a season to go. We're really going nowhere. Let's find out where we're going to need to go as an organization, because there's going to be a lot of decisions that have to be made, whether it's at quarterback or whether it's at, moving on from Jonathan Taylor, or just a completely different identity for this team. Because whatever it is before, or whatever it has been, it just hasn't been working.
Yeah, I mean, I think defensively they're still pretty good, right? They beat the Chiefs, like you said. They seem to match up against the Chiefs for whatever reason. They beat them a couple of years ago in Kansas City, I believe, on a Sunday night. So they seem to match up against them. Offensively, they're a mess right now.
How good are they going to stay? Because it's like, I think part of that is like you have an all-pro caliber corner and Stephon Gilmore that helps. I mean, he's still playing at a high level, but how much longer? So I don't see necessarily the foundation of youth, so to speak, in that Colts organization where you can sit there and say, yeah, you know what, this team, like the Patriots, for example, I look at the Patriots, I'm like, we might ultimately look at this situation, and this will make for an interesting conversation in the offseason, but we may ultimately look at this team and say, you know what, they're built to win now. They're just a quarterback away from winning a Super Bowl because of how good their defense is. But I see the Patriots defense as being good for the next couple of years. I don't necessarily see that with the Colts, because I don't know what their long-term outlook is. So,
their front seven's pretty good. Shaq Leonard is an outstanding player.
Oh, absolutely. When he's healthy.
Yeah, DeForest Buckner is a game wrecker at defensive line. So they've got some pieces there. But again, it all goes back to the quarterback. That's like the $64,000 question. Whereas if you get that problem solved, you should be able to cover up some of those holes that exist. And they haven't been able to do that since Andrew Luck left. I mean, they had like a great run of Peyton Manning, went to Andrew Luck. That looked like that was going to be a success. And it was to a degree, right? I mean, he went to the playoffs his first 3 years in the league with less than great roster around him. The biggest disappointment for the Colts offensively has been that offensive line. They spent a lot of money on it, and it's terrible. It's one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. You got Quentin Nelson, who I've always felt is maybe the best offensive lineman in football. He looks like he's regressed as well. So they got to fix that probably more than anything, because whether it's Sam Ellinger or whoever, they're going to be running for their lives because the offensive line is terrible.
Well, it's kind of like what's happening with the Cowboys, but at least the Cowboys have a franchise quarterback. You know what I mean?
Right.
And a coach, again, I think you can, whether you love him or hate him or whatever, I think you can accept that he's at least a stabilizing figure as a coach, Mike McCarthy. I mean, as much as, they may come up short, his teams in certain situations, I don't think we've ever seen dysfunction to the point of, just total ineptitude. Let's put it that way. Because again, going, what was that, 100 and some odd yards in total offense against the Patriots. Now, again, I think the Patriots defense is really good. Matthew Judon should be mentioned more in the conversation for offensive player of the year than what he has been, because he's been an absolute force. But that still isn't a good look on the head coach, because it seems like the team is just unprepared. And to your point earlier, just you don't see that energy from them. And again, there's a lot of reasons for that. So I'm certainly surprised. I mean, no doubt about it. Surprise, surprise, surprise. I can't believe they hired Jeff Saturday. I just saw him on ESPN like 3 days ago. But the more I think about it, I'm like, if you're the Colts, why not? Again, what do you got to lose? Certainly, this last half of the season. I mean, you could have him as your interim head coach, and he could be a revelation, or he could be the second coming of Barry Melrose 2.0. Who, at least in his situation, though, John, if you remember how this all worked out, he kind of, in a very similar fashion, got hired out of the booth but at least he had coaching experience in the league prior. It was just long time before that, and he was way out of touch with what the league was, and it only lasted, I think, like 12 games, and then he got fired.
The one comp I'll have is, I mean, I think you guys have interviewed him on the Eye Test podcast, Dick Vermeil.
Yeah.
Who was a phenomenal coach at UCLA, went to the Philadelphia Eagles, built them into a Super Bowl contender, and then he was burnt out. He went to TV for about 13, 14 years, maybe even longer, came back with the Rams and won a Super Bowl. But by the time the Rams had hired him, he had already been a great NFL coach. Now, the question at the time was, is he going to catch up to the modern game? Because, you know, he retired like in 83 and came back in 98 or whatever it was. And, you know, the game changes. And certainly he was a home run, won a Super Bowl with the Rams. Then went to Kansas City and had them in contention every year. Great coach. So, but he had already had all that coaching experience. Like you said, with Barry Melrose, same thing. Jeff Saturday's coached in high school. So we're going to have to see what he's up to at this point.
Well, hey, you know what? That is coaching experience. You never know. Like I said, look, like I said, I mean, this guy isn't, you know, when it comes to, you know, obviously coaching in the NFL, he has no experience, but, you know, he has experience with the NFL. So if I'm the Colts, roll the dice. Why the hell not? What do you got to lose? You know? So, all right, before we go, last night we saw the, what's it called? What's that team that won? The Ravens. Thank you. I kept wanting to call them something else, but no, we saw the Ravens pick up a win over the Saints. And look, I mean, if you're a Buccaneers fan, obviously you're happy that, you know, every team in your division lost this week and you won. But from an AFC standpoint, and this is something we're going to keep an eye on. We're obviously going to see what happens with Josh Allen's elbow. He's getting that checked out, and that could be a potentially devastating injury for the Bills if that's a he's out long-term situation. Because that, I mean, we already talked about it yesterday, the AFC being a little bit upside down, more so than what we thought. That happens, it's completely upside down. And normally you would think, oh, this is clear path for Kansas City to go to the Super Bowl. And I'm like, maybe 2 years ago or last year, but we were talking about it yesterday. It's like, yeah, they won, but, you know, I feel like that gap between them and everyone else is not as big as we thought it would be. So I'll ask you this. Are the Ravens one of those teams that could make a run? Because I think we understand their biggest issue is on defense, and having Roquan Smith out there should hopefully help. But can this team really put it all together? Because Lamar Jackson's playing some pretty good football. He had some moments earlier in the season, a couple, you know, poor decisions, but, you know, he's on pace to go over 1,000 yards rushing the ball, and he's doing a pretty darn good job throwing the ball. So do you think the Ravens can make a run at this?
Absolutely. I picked them to win the division before the season started. And I think both the Ravens and Cincinnati, and I'll put Miami in there because their passing attack is so lethal. Those are three teams that I don't know if you want to face in the divisional round. Obviously, Kansas City and Buffalo right now look like the two best teams, but we've got to see what happens with Josh Allen. That's a huge situation in Buffalo. Without Josh Allen, they're still a really good team, but they're not the Super Bowl favorite without the MVP.
They may not even be
obviously.
the division favorite without Josh Allen, and that's what could really flip things up, because all of a sudden you mentioned Miami, mention New England, might as well. I mean, their defense is legit. I don't know about their offense, but
the Jets defense is legit.
Yeah,
I mean, the Jets defense is certainly legit. They just beat Buffalo, so yeah. And Buffalo, not just Josh Allen, they got a lot of injuries in the secondary, right? So, and they still played a pretty good game on Sunday. They gave up 20 points. You would think with that offense they would win every game that they hold the opponent to 20 points, but it didn't happen because, you know, Allen struggled, got hurt late, and again, the Jets have a legitimate defense. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be much more interesting than we anticipated. Again, it depends on what Josh Allen, that injury. And even if he's playing, how healthy is he?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an elbow injury. It's not like he's, you know, can compensate for that. That's going to impact some of his deep throws, which he's phenomenal at. Although that last pass he threw, he did still send it 70 yards, which, you know, maybe a healthy Josh Allen sends it 75 yards and we get a different conversation with them winning the game. But yeah, that's going to be the big news of the next couple of days is what's the story with Josh Allen. But yeah, back to your earlier question, Baltimore certainly has the quarterback that can be the difference maker. They've got some nice weapons on offense. Their offensive line's coming together. And adding a player like Roquan Smith, not just on the field, helps. Also, I just think it pumps the team up, right? You went out and got an impact player, and the locker room gets charged up because of that.
Well, and look, I mean, the Ravens defense was awful the first month of the season, particularly the pass defense, and it has been. I mean, last year it wasn't great either. So this isn't just a bad stretch of football. This is, an alarming trend for them, and to be able to add a player that could potentially not necessarily fix the secondary. I mean, his impact can be felt across the defense, but to add some more talent to that side of the ball, where I think we all believe that at least in the regular season, the Ravens can get the job done. Now, obviously, the big thing for Lamar Jackson is, when are the playoff wins going to come? And, he has to have opportunities first before he can do that. So I think they're going to have the opportunity, certainly in the playoffs. How far they go is remains to be seen. But right now, I feel like this AFC, it's like the more every day that goes by, it becomes more and more open. And again, if Josh Allen's elbow is, a significant injury, then I think it completely throws the second half of the season into the blender, and we go from there. Like, I'll still say that Kansas City's got the edge, obviously, but again, they have yet to convince me that this is a juggernaut team that's just going to steamroll their competition, because they haven't. And it's not me being a hater or anyone out there. It's just they haven't done that yet. So I can't expect them just to do that, because, again, that'd be foolish. So what I'm thinking is, well, all of a sudden the door opens a little bit for teams like the Ravens, who might have struggled early on in the season, or a team like the Dolphins, who are strikingly similar to some of those Chiefs teams from the last couple of years, where their offense is obviously the big part of it, but what are they going to do defensively? Now, again, like the Ravens, they made a move for a Bears defender to hopefully bolster their defense, and I think it will. And I like the idea of the Dolphins being kind of a sneaky, AFC contender, and certainly a division contender, especially if Josh Allen is out. I think that opens the door for a team like Miami. But we're talking about all these teams, and they're all offensive teams. So what's the best way to kind of throw a roadblock in the way of a bunch of offensive teams? Well, guess what, Sean? You get a really good defensive team that could go out there and upset any one of those other teams. And I'm talking about the Patriots, because I'll ask you, and we're kind of sticking with the AFC. Is there a better defense in the AFC right now than the New England Patriots?
I would say the Jets. I think the Jets defense is that good. Their front seven is dominant.
Oh, sure.
Their back end is good. I mean, they're in the discussion for sure. Buffalo's defense, all their numbers are better than anyone's. But
yeah.
Again, I'm worried about their injuries.
Sorry. Let me clarify. Aside from Buffalo, I think I just kind of in my head was thinking aside from Buffalo. I just didn't say it. So obviously, aside from Buffalo, because I think we, assuming they're healthy, we all believe that they're the best team in the AFC, but health is a huge question right now. So outside of Buffalo, yeah, I mean, look, you throw the Jets in the mix, but I mean, they're about on par. And beyond that, I'm looking at some of the other contenders, and I'm like, man, these defenses don't match up. I mean, I keep seeing what I see every week from the Patriots, and it's like, yeah, there's been some bumps in the road, but I mean, how many sacks did they get yesterday or on Sunday?
Well, they had 9, and then we'll probably see the Raiders get a high number this week. Max Crosby, if he's healthy, could set the sack record on Sunday against the Colts. So, yeah, I mean, the thing about the defense is you got to also look at who you're playing on a weekly basis. And,
but that's, I think that's the thing. You're not playing, there's not too many good teams in this league. So it's like that.
No, but in the playoffs, if you play, it's a little different judging a team's defense when they're playing the Colts or the Chiefs. I mean, that's two totally different ends of the spectrum. So the Patriots have a good defense. I just think there's a few defenses in the AFC that are right there, maybe better. I think Cincinnati's defense is really good. They had a hiccup against Cleveland on the Monday night a week ago. I don't know what the hell happened that night, but they just had a stinker. Other than that, they've been pretty good defensively. They hadn't given up a touchdown in the fourth quarter the entire season until that game against Cleveland. So
that's wild.
They're pretty good. They're pretty good as well. So, I mean, from week to week, good luck figuring this league out. It just makes the constant team has been Philadelphia. That's the one team that brings it every single week on both sides of the ball and turn it over. They create turnovers and they win.
And look, I'm not going to try to be super dramatic, but we're going to find out if the Bucs win this past week against the Rams was the start of this run. I mean, we're going to find out this week. I mean, that's just what it's going to be, because I believe so. I believe everything surrounding the moment, how big the moment was for them, and to deliver in the fashion in which they did it. I think this is going to turn the page for the team. I mean, it's kind of, I mean, I'm again putting a lot of my faith in the idea that, you know, this coaching staff, I don't think it's great, but I think it'll be good enough to turn things around in terms of, you know, changing things. So, but to your point, Philadelphia has really been the one team that you can count on all season. The AFC, again, you have some pretty good teams. There's a lot of pretty good teams, and I include Kansas City in that mix right now because, again, I'm not probably going to bet against them, but at the same time, it's not like it has been the last couple of years where it's like you see a situation like this unfold with, say, Buffalo, and you're thinking, wow, Kansas City is just they got a free path to the Super Bowl. But I'm also sitting here saying, well, they struggled to beat a Malik Willis-led Titans team. They lost to Indianapolis. They've had a couple really close games, including having to come from behind against the Raiders early in the season to win late. So this team is certainly not a sure thing. So in the AFC, I'm like, roll the dice, John, especially if Josh Allen is out. Just roll the dice and see what happens, because I honestly, I have no clue. No clue.
Well, at this point last year, the Bengals were going to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. Probably nobody.
No. I mean, you thought some team from Ohio was, just not Cincinnati. But we're not gonna revisit.
I was in the right state.
Yeah. Well, it's a pretty big state. Really,
I should take a chance with teams in Texas or California. Especially in California, there's more options there, right?
Well, not this year.
Well, the 49ers were like a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, but you would think with 3 teams or 4 teams, you would have a little bit better chance. But 3 out of the 4 absolutely not contenders right now. So, all right, that's going to do it for us here today. We're going to keep an eye, obviously, on everything that goes on throughout this the rest of the week, including the Josh Allen situation. We should find out more today at some point Tuesday. And we will discuss it later in the week. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And be sure to give us a follow at FPC Radio Live. And, of course, head over to fullpresscoverage.com to check out everything great that is going on over there. So thank you, everyone, and we will talk to you soon.